All right, everyone. Again, this name is Rory Samper, Solutions Architect here at XTM International. Thank you again for joining us today. Um, we are here to discuss our XTM Connect webinar series. Topic today will be the Salesforce Service Cloud solution with Language IO, brought to you by Language IO. So I'd actually like to introduce Heather Shoemaker. She'll be running us through the Language IO solution from their side. So you get to see a lot of cool stuff today.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Rory. Nice to meet you all. This is Heather Shoemaker with Language IO.
Right, thanks, Heather. Just to real quick, briefly go over our topics for today. We'll be seeing how to easily find Salesforce articles that require translation. You could be able to submit approved costs, track project progress, as well as translate Salesforce articles within XTM, including our in-context visual mode, and also how to view those translated articles that are automatically pushed back into Salesforce. Heather also has a couple of cool tips, tricks, and features to show you as well. Heather, I'm going to pass the controls for you. Just so everyone else is aware, a couple housekeeping tips. Everyone is on mute. By default, there is a questions dialog box. Feel free to shoot those over as we go through content. We can keep an eye on those so we can ask Heather or myself any Language IO connector or XTM related questions. We're happy to answer those as we go. Otherwise, we'll have some time at the end. All right, Heather, you should now have control here.
All right. I'm going to select the right screen and sharing. And I will go ahead and start with a deck that kind of walks everybody high level through the Language IO XTM solution, and then I'll go straight to the demo. So Language IO has a number of Salesforce apps that automate translation processes, such as article translation, case translation, social case translation, and chat translation. Because we're focused today on the integration with XTM, I'm going to be demoing the article translation automation from Salesforce into XTM and back. And I'll do the same thing with cases, where a case response by a support agent might require a human translation instead of machine. Very quickly, the architecture of our solution looks something like this. You might have a support agent or a content editor who works inside of a CRM, such as Salesforce, supporting folks in lots of different languages. When that agent or content editor requires an article translation or a human translated response to a case inside of Salesforce, our app will reach out to the Language IO SaaS solution. And in the case of articles, the content will be pushed automatically into XTM, where linguists will go to work translating the content. As soon as they trigger the complete step within XTM, which I'll show you today, that content is automatically pushed back through Language IO and back into the CRM. Of course, we're going to be leveraging XTM translation memory, customer glossary terminology, etc., to make sure that those articles are translated properly and consistently. If it's a support agent who's responding to a ticket in a language that that agent doesn't speak, we'll employ machine translation for the incoming customer question in most cases. Language IO is plugged into 5 different machine translation engines and has all sorts of decisioning that determines which machine translation will be the best for that translation request. But for the agent's response to the customer, machine translation is an option, but so is human translation. And if the agent decides they need a human translated response to, say, a Chinese speaking customer, they can select that, and I'll show you how that works, in which case their response text is pushed into XTM, and rapid turnaround linguists working inside of XTM can very quickly translate that agent response. And as soon as they complete the translation, again, by APIs, it's automatically pushed back into Salesforce. Some of the customers that work with language, some of the companies that work with Language IO are brands that you probably recognize. These are some of the folks that use our solutions today. And our claim to fame is that, of course, we enable English or mono-speaking customer support agents to communicate with customers in any language. So our technology enables your existing support agents and content editors to provide support and content in any language. And 72% of Language.io customers don't even have to hire an additional support agent to when the company goes global. So at this point, what I'm going to do is go straight to the demo. So this should look familiar to everybody who has worked with Salesforce before. And I'm going to start today in the Classic version. Our apps work both in Classic and Lightning. A lot of people are still using Classic though, so I'll do one of the apps in Classic and the other in Lightning. And let's start with articles, because a company's knowledge base is often the largest body of content that requires translation when a company goes global. And having an automated way to get all of your single source articles translated will save your organization massive amounts of time and cost. So this is where a content editor would be authoring articles. Usually you're going to have a lot more than 3 articles. This is a demo, so I'm keeping it simple today. But of course, this view will contain hundreds in many cases. So if you're going to edit an article or create a new article, it doesn't matter to us. You're just going to do your thing. I've got an article here that I've already created. So you can see that it has an English screenshot, a few screenshots that don't require localization, but lots of content, of course, that requires translation. So maybe you've just updated this article, maybe you've changed one line in it, or maybe you've written it from scratch today. Doesn't matter. We'll just go ahead and make a quick change. So it registers as having changed, and we're going to save and close our changed article. And at this point, what we're going to do is transfer over to the Language.io app that lives right inside of Salesforce. And when you open up the Language.io app, this is where you're going to create a new translation project that is comprised of all of the articles that require translation. The first thing you're going to see is the active tab that shows you all projects that are currently underway, not yet completed. You have a completed tab that shows you projects that have been completed, and you have an all tab that shows you everything, so you have a complete history there. Usually when you switch over to the Language.io app, it's because you want to create a new project. So we're going to click over to create new project. And we've got lots of search functionality. This is key because the search views provided by Salesforce by default are kind of difficult when it comes to finding the articles that require translation. So we give you lots of functionality to assist with that. So the first thing that you have to provide is the source language of your articles, and this defaults to the source language of your knowledge base within Salesforce. So usually you can just leave that alone. You can specify whether you want to search for published or draft articles, and you can enter free-form text that's going to search for articles with a particular term in any of the searchable fields in that article type in the case of Classic. Topics, data categories, and we also give you these handy date search functions. So for example, you can say, I only want to see articles that I've created within a range. You can also say, I only want to see articles that I've updated within a range. So let's say I only want to see articles that I've updated the last 7 days. You can also specify article types in the case of Classic. Channels, we don't need to specify any today. And then these two toggles are super big time savers. So you can say, I only want to see articles with outdated translations. So if you've been updating articles over the period of a couple weeks and it's time to package those all into a translation project, you're going to toggle that on, and your search results will just show you all of the articles that you've updated. And let's say you're taking your knowledge base to a brand new language. You can say only show articles with no translations in these languages. So for example, if you're going into Russian for the first time, that toggle will show you which articles, probably all of them if it's for the first time, haven't yet been translated into Russian. Once you've got all of your criteria ready, you can search, and you're going to see a list of articles that fit the criteria. Now, normally you're going to be packaging a lot of articles into a project all at once. To keep it very simple today, because we're going to demonstrate a round trip from Salesforce through Language.io into XTM and back, I'm going to keep it super simple, and we're just going to translate this one article. But again, this list can contain hundreds of articles. You can select all of them or just a couple of them in the list that met your criteria. And if this list is wrong, it's not what you want, you can go back and it will remember your filters on the previous screen. At this point, though, we're just going to move ahead and name our project. So let's call it something very exciting. And it will tell you how many articles are going to be part of this project. In our case, it's just one, the source language of our project. And then we can specify whether we want the translations to be published when they're pushed back into Salesforce. If that is left not on, which is what I'm going to do, the articles, when they're translated, will be pushed back in draft mode and left for the administrator or the content manager, or who's ever in charge of articles, to publish on their side. And then, of course, you're going to select your targeted languages. Now, you can select everything by toggling that on. This list is going to be populated with all of the articles that you have enabled within your Salesforce knowledge base. It's not a random list, it's specific to Salesforce. Again, I'm going to keep it very simple. We're just going to select Spanish, and then we're going to click on Request Quote. And what happens at this step is the content, and we will just say yes, is pulled from Salesforce, passed through Language IO where some processing occurs, and via API pushed into XTM. It's going to trigger the project templates that we've set up for you during the onboarding process. And that template in XTM will dictate whether the linguist immediately starts working on the project or whether a project manager assigns linguists. There's a lot that occurs. But this step can take a little bit of time because as the content is pushed into XTM, XTM does all of the processing to compare the content against translation memory, determine which portions of that article have or haven't already been translated, etc. So once the project is created, you'll get this notification that it was created successfully. At this point, we can go back to View Projects. And at the top of Active, we're going to see XTM Demo Tuesday, which is what I named the project. And right now, the status is awaiting customer approval. It hasn't started yet. You'll also see that to the left of our new project, we have articles. If we click on that, we'll see which articles are part of our project, so you always know that. And we also see this feature called Quote. When we click on Quote, what we're going to see is data that's been pulled straight from XTM, and it's going to give us very high-level cost information. This is going to be more important if you're working with a third-party vendor within your XTM instance, and you want to know the cost of that project. If you've got in-house linguists working within your instance of XTM, it'll probably be less important, but it does give you good information about the size of the project. There may or may not be project management fees. That's configurable. But let's say that cost does matter to you. In that case, if you do have authority to approve the project, you can go ahead and automatically start it by selecting this auto start option. There's also a rush start option, which could trigger a different template in XTM, assign your rush linguist to the project. And then you could also say, you know what, I don't have authority to approve this amount, so I'm going to request a detailed quote, in which case when you hit submit, the project won't actually start in XTM. Instead, a quote is going to be emailed to you, and offline you can negotiate the cost or whatever needs to happen before the project is actually started. This is a demo, so I'm going to select auto start, which means as soon as I hit submit, the project will be passed to the linguists, assigned to the linguists in any case, and they'll be notified that it's time to start translating content. Notes can also be added, which will be pushed into the XTM project as well as sent to the project manager associated with your account. So at this point, I'll go ahead and hit submit. And again, because I selected auto start, the project at this point is going to be assigned to the linguist inside of XTM. And if we look at our list of projects again, we'll see instead of awaiting customer approval, the translation is in progress. Now, if you are the person who works inside of XTM, writing content, or at least managing that content, sending articles for translation, et cetera, your work is pretty much done here. You can track the status of the project inside of Salesforce. When anything changes inside of XTM, the status is updated here. So you pretty much don't have to do anything beyond that. However, let's now switch over to the XTM view so you can see what happens on the linguist side. So right now I'm logged in as a linguist, not as an administrator. So I'm seeing a view that's very limited. We're only actually seeing tasks and concordance. If you were logged in as an administrator, sorry, I can't think of words today, you'd see a lot more tabs across the top there to manage the projects, etc. All right, so it looks like the XTM Demo Tuesday project was pushed into my view as a linguist. I've got lots going on here, but we're just going to focus on the XTM Demo Tuesday project today. So when I'm ready to translate this, what I'm going to do is click on the little 3-bar option there, and I'm going to open XTM Workbench in XTM visual mode. And what happens here is the content of that article that I showed you inside of Salesforce is displayed. It's actually rendered because that was HTML content. And so the XTM Workbench in visual mode actually renders the HTML. So as a linguist, I can click through it segment by segment. And in this case, I've set up the template so it was machine translated. MTPE, or machine translation with a human post edit, is a really common way to translate these days, and XTM makes that super easy. I've also got translation memory for this particular article, so there's not a lot for me to do here. I will just point out that any of the glossary or terminology terms that were set up for this account are being called out. So Language.io, the name of our company, is one of those terms that has been set up in the terminology for this account. And you can see that the linguist is being told, leave that in English, don't translate it because it's the name of the company. So as a linguist, I'm just going to click through all of this content until I'm happy with it. And then I'm going to finish that piece of the article. Now with Salesforce, especially on the classic side, articles have to be created with the particular article type that you've set up for your knowledge base. And then each article type has a number of translatable fields or custom fields that you've created for that article type. Some of the custom fields will be translatable. You want them translated. Other of the custom fields within that article type don't contain content that you actually want translated. It might be a date timestamp. It might be another programmatic value or an internal value. Those won't show up in XTM. When we set you up on the Language.io side, we will work with you to determine which of those fields actually require translation. And those are the fields that are going to be pushed into XTM when you request translation of an article. So this piece is the summary field within this article. It's not HTML, so you're not seeing it rendered as HTML. It's just plain text that's already been translated. We've got an ice match in translation memory, so we're good to go there. And then we've got one more piece of this article, which is the title. Again, not HTML content, it's plain text, already translated. We also have the Language.io key term highlighted here and preserved in English. It's a nice match, so we will finish. And once we've translated those 3 pieces of the project is flagged as complete. And you see that it's no longer in my queue as a linguist. And at this point, what's going on is XTM is calling back the Language.io server, which is pulling all of the translated article content out of XTM and pushing that content back into Salesforce. So now, if we click back into our Language.io app, this release is called Absaroka, and we refresh this view, once XTM is done processing the content and pushing it back into Salesforce, we're going to see XTM Demo Tuesday disappear from this active tab where it still is. Sometimes this can take up to 5 minutes. And it'll be moved over to the completed tab when all of the processing is done. At this point, we're just going to wait until we're done processing and the content is pushed back in. If this takes too long, we will switch over to the case translation, and I'll show you that while we're waiting for the processing to complete.
Yeah, great. I think right now actually might be also a good time just to point out as well that obviously all of your configurations and everything within XTM are all compatible with obviously this process as well. So as the configuration is based off of your project template, the ability to pre-assign resources to, as Heather showed, automatically start workflows, have certain workflows, customized workflows, that can all be included. Also, as I mentioned, with the rate cards associated to your user. So just one thing also keep in mind that this could essentially be a plug-and-play solution into your existing XTM program. And I'll
Exactly.
pass it back as I see that is now completed, Heather.
Thanks, Rory. All right, so yeah, it's disappeared from our active list because the project has been completed, meaning it's pushed back from XTM into Salesforce. We see XTM Demo Tuesday showing up here. And at this point, what we can do is click back over to Article Management. And I'll show you a few views of this. So at this point, let's click over to translations because we specified that we did not want it to be published. And we are going to show translations here. And under draft translations, we are now seeing that article that we just translated in XTM showing up as translated here. We can go ahead and publish it at this point because we're happy with it. I won't go through that process now, but we can also just jump in and preview it because there's a few things I want to show you about what happens when Language.io pushes the translated article from XTM back into Salesforce. So if you recall, this screenshot used to be in English. When we take the translated content from XTM and push it back into Salesforce, we also apply rules that look for IMG tags, links to related articles, links to your corporate website, and we can create rules that automate the localization of those links. So the Spanish article isn't pulling in an English screenshot, it's pulling in a Spanish screenshot because Language.io automatically rewrote the source attribute of that IMG tag to pull this screenshot from, say, an ES directory instead of the original English images directory. And we can do similar things to make sure that this translated article links out to related Spanish articles, not related English articles. And again, corporate websites, any other resources for which you have a localized version, we can create a rule to pull in the localized version of that resource. All right, so that wraps up article management and how to translate articles, create the translation project in Salesforce, trigger the push into XTM, perform the translation in XTM, and then see the translated article pushed back in. At this point, I also wanted to show you how it works if you want to respond to a ticket, a case response to the customer human translated. So I've got, let's say I'm a support agent. I've got a number of cases to respond to in my queue. I'm going to jump into just one of them here. If this is a language that I don't speak, I'm an English speaking support agent. Your standard tab will be this one where you see the standard case view. If you recognize this isn't your language and you need a translation, you're going to click over to the Language.io tab. This can actually be called anything when we set it up for you. You can call it translate this case if you want to. And what our tab is going to show you are all translatable pieces or threads within this case. So right now we're seeing that there's a subject and a description because all we have in this case is what the customer sent. The customer just initiated it. So we can translate the subject by clicking on this row and clicking on translate. It's going to send the subject to the Language.io server. In this case, it's going to machine translate it. It's just more cost effective and faster to machine translate the incoming customer content because the agent is the only one who sees these translations of customer content. So if it's not a perfect translation, no big deal. As long as you understand it, you're fine. So let's go ahead and translate the body of the customer's email as well. We click on this row and then hit translate. Note that there's also a partial option. If you don't really want to deal with translating the whole thing, you can just select a portion of the incoming customer Spanish and click on translate, or you can translate the whole thing. Either way, the same thing happens. It's pushed to the Language.io server and a machine translation is pushed back in. I need to add a new term to the glossary for the chat app for Salesforce. Okay, no problem. That's a good translation. We totally get it. And we're ready to move on. So at this point, when you're ready to respond to the customer, you're going to click back to the visual editor where you usually respond to emails. And we don't need that. Let's get rid of that. We're going to say something in English because that's our language. See if I can spell. So often when you're responding to a ticket, you are able to pull in an article or a quick text, something already translated that responds, because you answer these questions like 10 times a day, right? There will generally be some unique text that you will want to translate. But let's say it's a super complicated response and you don't want to trust it to a machine translation engine. Over here to the right, you see the option to request a human translation of your response. So we toggle over to human, we click on translate here right next to our English response in the visual editor. And basically the same thing is happening that happened in the article app. It's grabbing the content from the visual editor and it's passing it to XTM where your human linguist can go ahead and translate it quickly. Now over here on the LIO tab, Language IO tab, we refresh that, we will see that for our response in English, human translation request was received. It hasn't been pushed back in yet, but we know that a request for a human translation was successful. So at this point, let's go back over to XTM where that content is going to show up. And I will, again, wait for that to pop up here. And there it is. That is our ticket response. So when I click into that task as the linguist, you're already familiar with this. You're going to see each segment already machine translated because this template was set up for MTPE scenario. I'm just going to go with these machine translations. I'm going to click on finish. And that is the only piece of content in this project. So what's happening at this point is just like before, XTM is making a call to the Language IO server. It's of course disappeared from my list of tasks as a linguist. Language IO is pushing it back into Salesforce. And as soon as it pushes back in, we're going to see the status updated. You can see that that pushed in very quickly, human translation complete. Over here on the chatter tab, we're going to need to refresh for human translations. It doesn't automatically refresh the chatter tab. And when we do, and we click back into that visual editor, we will see that my human translation, normally, from the XTM linguist queue has been pushed straight back into the visual editor, and we are ready to either send our human translated response back to the customer. We can pull in additional resources, such as a human translated article that we translated via the process I showed you previously. And we can pull in already translated quick text, etc. And we send, and you have completed the process. So at that point, this point rather, I am ready to take questions, Rory, if any have come up.
Great. We actually do not have any questions at the moment, but if anyone does, please again feel free to enter those into the questions dialog box. Maybe just give people a couple of minutes here.
Yeah, no problem.
One thing I did want to maybe point out or mention, I suppose, a general question to you, Heather. When using the, when sending that, just the response email, that will create a project with an XTM and actually leverage your TM, correct? So if you
Absolutely.
have had that response previously, it will still pull in.
Absolutely. If there was an ICE match for that, you can pull it in. That's a great point, Rory. If you're responding to the same questions over and over again and you forget that you have a quick text or an article that already answers that, you won't have to pay to retranslate content for which you already have an ICE match in XTM.
Very cool.
A few things that I'll point out. Was there something else?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. So let's say in the case of support tickets, you manage a group of agents and you don't speak Spanish or whatever language this ticket came in either, but you want to see the full history in both languages. You can click back over to the Language IO tab and you'll see both the Spanish and the English version of each thread. So that's an important point. The translations that Language IO provides and pushes back into Salesforce are all stored in custom objects. So you can also run reports within Salesforce that show you how many words you've translated on the ticket side or the article side of things, and for which languages. Really handy reports that give you a feel for language usage within your support organization.
Okay, great. Thank you, Heather. So I don't see any immediate questions. Just so everyone is aware, though, this is we are recording this webinar as well. So if you'd like to request a recording here, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, obviously, there are, if you're not currently using XTM or Language IO, we have a free 30-day trial of XTM. If you'd like to go through a proof of concept, or if you do have an existing XTM account and would like to look at doing a proof of concept of this Language IO solution here, please just feel free to reach out to your account manager. Otherwise, Heather, unless there's anything else that you'd like to go over, I think we can wrap this up. Thank you so much for showing this. Language IO is obviously a very cool, very slick solution to a lot of things.
Thanks, Rory. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope everyone is staying safe and has a great rest of the week. Take care.